Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today is August the 23rd, 2023. And we are going to have a conversation, kind of introducing to the public for the first time this particular concept called ci.Ka, which of course is inspired by my research into the etymology of the place name Kemet. So, we have a lot to discuss. So I want y'all to hold tight, and we'll be back in just a moment. And we are back. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. And I know you could be anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here with me. So I am 1,000 times blessed. And just want to give a shout out to everyone who has made themselves known in the chat. So peace and love to Sister Mika One. And I'm glad that you got your book today. Thank you for joining. Dasha Rob is in the building. Peace and blessings to Learn Together with Obam, who is in the building. Musoni is in the building, all the way from Azania, I should say. Che is in the building. Zoo 221 is in the building. Peace and blessings to you, good brother. And Octo Thorpe is in the building. Sister Gigi, all the way on the West Coast, is joining us today. Peace and love to you. And lastly, Unkoma Dejed, thank you for joining. And peace to everyone who is joining us from Facebook as well as X, the new name for Twitter. I don't know if I can get down with X. There was only one X, and he passed not too long ago. Peace and blessings to you, Brother Robert Rand. Thank you for joining. And Goons Machete is in the building. Thank you both for joining the conversation today. So let me pivot just a little bit to remind everyone that the new text is out, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt 1. And Towards an Etymology of the Place Name Kemet is the subtitle. It is around 500 pages, and it is pretty dope, I must say. And so, all these years of discussing this topic ad infinitum has culminated to this particular point. And so there's some articles, if you have some of my previous works, that'll be familiar to you, also with some new articles and details in this text as well. So, the older conversations have been expanded and or corrected in certain parts. And of course, with the new and added material in here as well. And this is a good reference text. And so I give, good citations for where you can find the various terms of Kim in the scholarly literature. And, so I await your feedback, and thanks to all of you who have purchased the text already. So most of y'all who have pre-ordered already, you should have your books by now. There's a few of you who haven't gotten it yet, about 6 of you. It should be either coming like right at the end of the month or right at the beginning of the next month, which is like a week or so. So it was kind of 2 batches that went out at different times. So given, the nature of the conversation today, I want to kind of just, jump in it. And so I'm just going to start off by saying, first and foremost, that the conversation that we're having today is built up from my research from here. So this is something that is, kind of very academic in terms of its scope and discussion. But what I am dealing with today is the application side of it, and that's not really discussed in this text. And so there may be, of course, a smaller text, something for the laypersons that will kind of culminate, the things that we'll talk about today, and some things that we just won't have time to get into. And this is the job of an activist scholar. It's, what is the information? We have a questions that we look at, and then we say, okay, well, how can this help African people? And in terms of the findings in this we're going to get into today. So I even have a commercial that some of y'all may have seen already. I guess I'll just play it.
Yeah. Tokyo wanna those that. What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for in part uno. Came to kick the door where the game in judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack flight. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 8-5. Oh, I'm so ready, by enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary, hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.
Indeed. I may start, starting off the shows that, the show has started, and it will still be, of course, every now and then. So, and I also did one for the segment that we're going to mention this. So the ci.Ka, philosophy, paradigm, praxis, it's going to be a segment on camera went out for it. So we're going to line a number of interviews to urban Africa, of the trade. And so I'm interviews for you now, and some of them area. I apologize. I don't know what's going on here. Hopefully we'll get back into this mug. And so, here we go. There we go. And so he said, I thought it was a Durban internet. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's something going on with the Wi-Fi out here. Not sure what is going on there. Hopefully we don't have any more interruptions. But this is why I usually, when I do my shows, I have a backup computer on deck just in case something happens on the main computer, and this will allow the show to stay on without it cutting off for some reason. So were y'all getting some choppiness or something on y'all end? Let me know in the chat. And if so, I will try to kind of reduce. I may just cut the camera off. Well, it's a presentation, most of this anyway, so you won't see me. So I'll turn the camera off and see if that does something with the buffering. But I'm going to say, all right. I'm going to share my screen real quick. So we'll do that. He said it's okay now. And Moyo greetings. And Bote, he says, Molo Adi na Nganya, if I'm saying it. No, I'm not saying it correctly. Ganya. He says he's watching from Congo, Brazzaville. Very nice. I appreciate you joining us today. And so let me do that. So let me turn this cam off and see what it's going to do. I'm going to make that big screen and we'll go from here. So y'all let me know. And we should be good. Let me know if y'all can see my screen. I think y'all can. So Mika says, want to see your sexy self, leave the camera on. Yeah, I don't know. That it's tripping. They don't want this blacknificent information to get out. So we're gonna see if we can appease the buffer gods, real quick. So we'll just get started. So as I stated earlier, the concept of ci.Ka. So many of y'all may have heard me refer to the Egyptian language as ci.Ka, and that was after Dr. Mubabingi Bilolo, who first made the connection between the concept of ci.Ka, or the pronunciation of ci.Ka, with the word Kemet. And I followed in his footsteps and been using the term ever since. And I found his initial analysis to be valid, and thus I used the name. But as we will see, you can see I have this spelling here, ci.Ka, with 2 A's instead of the normal 1 A that you are used to seeing me present this term. So there's a reason for that, and we'll get into that later. And so ci.Ka, the title of our discussion today is ci.Ka, an Afrocentric agricultural philosophy, paradigm, and praxis, right? And so many of you may know that, I'm always looking for creative ways to utilize and update and modernize different, historical African concepts to be utilized around the world, and especially in the diaspora. And so I've come up with this concept called an African thinking cap, and I'm always putting on my African thinking cap. And CAP itself is an acronym for Creative Application of African Philosophy. And so the idea of ci.Ka falls within, that the African thinking cap is the fruit of putting on the African thinking cap, right? It is also within the tradition of Kimoyo. And so, Kimoyo, coming out of the Kikongo language, is the term that I choose to use to refer to what we in the West call African spirituality. That concept of African spirituality is really not describe exactly what is going on in the continent, especially dealing with the underlying philosophy and framework by which the African people are utilizing on the continent on a daily basis. And so, in this fight to reconceptualize and to take back authentically, African terms and concepts. So instead of saying African religion, we say Kimoyo, right? And we define Kimoyo in three distinct ways. You can say the art of adding life to life, or it is the way of vitality and prosperity, or you can say it is the art of making things to flourish in all areas of life. So, this is the tradition. And, we've done many videos on this, so I won't expand on it. But the conversation that we're having today falls within a Kimoyo tradition. So we're trying to build a modern tradition off of something that is grounded and actually very ancient in Africa, right? So this again is, kind of a logo that I created for the concept of ci.Ka. And I may get I may print up some t-shirts with this on the front, right? So you can, kind of take this everywhere. But it is, of course, the word ci.Ka with the hieroglyphic symbol of the hoe at the top. And that's going to become very important later on in our conversation, right? So even though y'all may be hearing of this term and this concept for the first time, relatively recently, and some of y'all even today, I actually been on this path for a very long time, over a decade now. And it really kind of starts, again with this, coming to realizing that the word Kemet has to deal with, a farmland or a wetland in general. But it lends itself right back to agriculture. And when I was studying, various different African approaches to agriculture and things, I came across this book in 2010 titled Rooted in the Earth: Reclaiming the African American Environmental Heritage by Deanne D. Glave. And I hope to get her on the program so we can discuss her text and the movement that she has created. But, she is one of the inspirations for going along, in this path and trying to re-emphasize our agricultural roots using this label called ci.Ka. And so, just a brother holding up some good greens, as you can see here. We got another sister, I believe those are some newly ripened or almost ripe tomatoes. And here's another brother who some of y'all may have heard of, and his name is Ron Finley. He's out of Los Angeles, and they call him the quote unquote gangster gardener, right? And he's famous for this quote here. It says, "Growing your own food is like printing your own money." And so, it's really kind of interesting that we were brought over here especially for farm work, but many African Americans have abandoned that knowledge of of farming. But what you're starting to see is a resurgence of people going back to the land and cultivating the land for various different purposes. And, especially when we consider that many of us live in food deserts, this is definitely a path to go. So, one of my objectives is to make agriculture central to the culture itself, right? So that's the one of the main aims of ci.Ka, to make agriculture the culture. And so that's why it's um, the title of this is an Afrocentric, because of course we got to do everything Afrocentrically, an Afrocentric agricultural paradigm, philosophy and praxis, right? And so I think this is the area in which you'll find Ron Finley, and so there's a lot of urban gardens sprouting up, and I encourage y'all to really kind of look him up and to see, the kind of work that he's doing, and hopefully I can get him on the show as well, right? And so, as I said earlier, this conversation is born out of defining the word Kemet in the ancient Egyptian language. And I've been able to redefine historical comparative linguistics and, of course, the comparative method, and a deep philological analysis of ancient Egyptian texts, and, of course, the scanning of the hieroglyphs themselves, all of that to come to the conclusion that the word Kemet means or can be defined as a pasturage with an abundance of grass and water. And we find cognates in various African languages, uh, but one important cognate for the word Kemet is in the Sumerian language, which is Kidur, and it means damp, brown, irrigable land. In the Chiluba Bantu language, one of many cognates is ci.Ka, a piece of land filled, part of the land is being plowed in a day. In other words, farmland, right? And we come to the definition of Kemet based on this particular progress. So when you read the ancient Egyptian dictionaries, they define the word Kemet to mean the black land, assuming that the word Kemet derives from the adjective Kim, that means black. And they assume it is an association with the alluvial soil that is deposited on the ground after the annual inundation period. And so this has kind of been a staple in Egyptology in terms of the definition of the place name Kemet. And then actually a little bit earlier than that, but more prominently in 1974, the late Dr. Cheikh Diop was, along with Dr. Theophilo Benga, was involved in the Cairo Symposium. And in that set of debates and discussions, he introduces the argument that the word Kemet doesn't mean black land. It in fact means black people. And so as a result of that introduction, an alternative meaning for the word Kemet, it has been the source of an ongoing debate on the meaning and the application, the proper meaning and application of the place name Kemet. And so, way back in 1998 is when I first got involved in studying in this particular subject, but my first paper on it wasn't actually written until 2002, which I presented at a symposium at the University of Houston. And so, but my stance has changed over the years as I've gotten, more accurate information. And so, of course, my latest rendition of the meaning is that, of course, Kemet means the a pasturage with an abundance of grass and water, and that's more of a poetic meaning in itself. But you can also define it as a riparian land. And there is a root kim meaning to rise and to fill, and that's the verb form. And then there's a kim meaning complete and full. And it's from this nation of complete and full that we get the word Kemet, meaning a riparian land, because Kim the Kemet is referring really technically to the Nile River, and it is describing the behavior of the flooding of the Nile River. So you get this notion of the rising of the Nile River, and then its overflow, its filling up of the edges of the on the lands for which it touches. And it is from that process that they do the farming and irrigation, and they were able to survive, in that desert plain because of the presence of the Nile River. So when you're speaking of Kemet, you're really speaking about the centrality of the Nile River, and you're describing the behavior of the flooding process. And so that's how you get this notion of a riparian land, and land with an abundance of grass and water and the like. And it is confirmed in this particular slide here describes what a riparian zone is, right? And it discusses the interface between land and a river stream. And matter of fact, even in Bowley, how he defines the word Kemet in his 2010 work is simply a land with a river running through it. But I go much further to say yes, but it's more so the behavior of the river that is important. It's not just the presence of the river. And so when we go down to the bottom here, it says riparian land refers to terrain that is adjacent to rivers and streams and is subject to periodic or occasional flooding. And that's the central characteristic for what makes, right? And so we have this text. So remember I said that Kiduru in Sumerian is cognate, and we argue that it is cognate based on the regular sound meaning correspondences between the two languages. So Kiduru in this particular text, she wrote an article titled "Let Me Be Your Canal: Some Thoughts on Agricultural Landscape and Female Bodies in Sumero-Akkadian Sources." And so this is Dr. M. Erica Calto Ferreira, if I'm pronouncing that remotely correct. And when she defines Kiduru, she says it specifically refers to a plot of land. So it lets you know that it's a land that has been conveniently inundated before plowing can take place. Right. So this is why is defined as an irrigated or a wet land or damp land. But what's characteristic of this is the fact that it has been inundated. In other words, this is a particular type of land that has been flooded. And so it corresponds greatly with the concept of Kemet, and we would expect it since they are in fact cognates linguistically, right? So this is the semantic chart, and I'm not sure to what degree that y'all can see this, but if y'all have the book, this chart is repeated on page, let me find it, 334. So if you have the book, you can go to page 334 and see it more clearly if you can't see it on the screen, for those of you who have the text already. But there is a semantic evolution which helps to explain how this came to be. And this chart also explains some other subjects that were covered in the text that we won't cover here. But of course, Many of the words in the China-Intu or Negro Egyptian languages derive from body parts. And so the most ancient root has to deal with a body part, limb, or the foot, leg. And then you have the foot, leg, and then you have the action of the foot, leg, which and it derives words meaning to go, to run, or to propagate, to spread, or whatnot. And then it also, in another semantic domain, comes to mean land and field and the concept of below in terms of direction below, as well as the earth itself. But from this go, run, propagate man team comes the words for water and river, because the words for water and river is really describing the flow of the liquids, not necessarily the quality of the makeup in terms of its wetness or anything like that. It's describing the character, because we're good fresh water. Drinking water is water that runs. So you don't drink water that is still, you drink water that runs. So even when you leave the faucet running, we're still using that old semantic notion in our head. And so from that same root comes to spread and disperse. And then that's where you get that word kim, meaning to rise, and we add here to swell based on other languages. And then this notion to fill and to complete, but also to flood and inundate. And from that flood and inundate, do you get again river, water, wetland, watered field. So this is the semantic path. If you can follow it here, you can kind of, when you come back and revisit, if you don't have the book, you can look at this on your own. And so I utilize the com with two A's based on, a common spelling of the word in the Cameroonian Bantu languages for farm. So in the Bassa language, you would say kam, and Doi is kam, and Esitako is ekam. And so the ki or chi has been reduced to e or e in Esitako. And so in Goldzin is just simply kam. In the Runda language is kumadin, which means farm, and then adin, that din is kind of a word meaning to cultivate, right? So it is from this Bassa and Esitako form that you get ci.Ka. So this is simply a word meaning farm. So this is how we're going to define it: farmland, right? But chi has many applications in Bantu languages, and we'll get into how we can flip it and be creative with it, right? And so, there are many organizations, especially in the United States, that, are getting Black people reconnected with farm work and the like. And, one thing you can look for is a Black Farmers Collective. So if you have time, look them up. And if you are interested in some things, try to connect with them. And then, of course, dealing with goats and cows and all that other good stuff is just what we do. And so ci.Ka is, again, a philosophy, a paradigm, and a praxis. So for the rest of this conversation, we're going to go and look at, these three P's is what I call them, and so when you're talking about philosophy, you're not talking about theory in the scientific sense, but you're talking about fundamental grounding and propositions, right? And then the paradigm, when you're speaking about a paradigm, you're speaking about a model. And so our model is farming. So what we're going to be doing with the ci.Ka tradition as we're building it is we're going to be looking at farming, the act of farming, the understanding of nature and the growing and the replanting and cycles and all that as a model to better understand life itself and to look for solutions that we can learn from the concept of farming and apply that in our social life, right? Our social and economic life. So that's why, farming is going to be the model. And then, of course, praxis is the application. So going again, it's going to be these fundamental propositions, um, that we build on and we utilize and discuss, as well as the concept of farming itself. And, we're looking for practical applications for these particular concepts. And so, again, when we study ancient Kemet was an agricultural society. And much of what you see has to deal with economics and farming, right? With a hint of some pastoralism, because many of them originated amongst pastoral societies. So you'll see a lot of pastoralism as well. But fundamentally, ancient Egypt is an agricultural society. So much of what you see is the result of studying nature so that they can better grow food in a desert landscape. So I hope that makes sense, right? So ci.Ka as philosophy. So what is philosophy? So philosophy, of course, is the systematized study of general and fundamental questions, such as those about the existence, reason, knowledge, values, mind, and language. There are 7 branches of philosophy: metaphysics, axiology, logic, aesthetics, epistemology, ethics, and political philosophy. A philosopher is an intellectual person who seeks wisdom or enlightenment. They study about knowledge, truth, and the nature and the meaning of life. So, when we're asking all of these questions, we're going to be asking these questions from an agricultural lens and also from an Afrocentric lens, right? And so this is just a kind of another thing to help you to understand what philosophy is as understood today. And Dr. Theophilo Benga has done an excellent work on tracing the origins of philosophy, not only in terms of the concept, but even the word itself in the ancient Egyptian language. So if you have his African philosophy book, the blue book from 2004, it is, I believe, he goes into that, right? And so you can see again, it is dealing with ethics. So what is value? Aesthetics, what is beauty? Metaphysics, what is real? Epistemology, how do we know what we know? Right? Logic, how do we reason? And political philosophy, how should societies be governed? And so this isn't all, and y'all can come up with questions yourselves, and we can attack these things. And so this is something that we're building together. So here are just a few fundamental questions for ci.Ka that we approach under the philosophical series of questions. So our first question is: under what evidence and logic do we know that an African-centered approach to problem solving works in the lives of African people? And so, when I'm having these discussions with people in our community, people are looking, they'll say stuff like, that the African stuff is nice, but I got rent due at the first, right? How can I build generational wealth using an African-centered approach to life, right? And we fundamentally ask the question, is African-centeredness a viable approach to solving problems regarding African people, right? And so we pose those questions, and these are kind of the things we will discuss and have discussed, right? So what is truth in the African sense? So when we're talking about the truth, what do we mean by truth? And so I have here define ma'at, right? So ancient Egyptian, the word for truth, or a word for truth, is ma'at. And if you have my Aluja volume 1, my Aluja volume 2, you'll know that the first chapter is defining the word ma'at. And I've been able to ascertain that the word ma'at, meaning truth, derives from a verb meaning to walk the correct path. And so for us, at least from an ancient Egyptian perspective, when it comes to walking the correct path, what do we mean by that? Who set the path? Right? These are the kinds of questions that we ask. Thirdly, in what ways can the activity of farming inform us of what it means to be valuable, and what does it mean to add value? So remember what kimoyo is, right? Um, it is the art of adding life to life. It is dealing with vitality and prosperity. And so remember that going back here, when we talk about ethics, what is value? Right? And so we're asking this fundamental question, and people don't even know what value means. So, from a linguistic perspective, we come to find out that value ultimately comes from a root wall in Proto-Indo-European, meaning to be strong and well. So when something has value, it has strength, it has power, it has the ability to make change. So the more the better the ability of a thing to make change, the more powerful it is. So the question that we ask from a ci.Ka perspective is, in what ways can we make African people more valuable? In other words, how can we empower African people? What will contribute and expand their health? Right? So that's a fundamental question of ci.Ka. Lastly, as a final example, what can the practice of farming teach us about systems, about scale, about reinvestment? And I put here as an example, sacrifice of first fruits. I don't know how many of y'all have been involved in any, African agricultural rights, where, like for example, in Houston, Texas, we have this thing called that NBUF puts on. It's an organization called NBUF, puts on yearly, called the Caravan to the Ancestors. And we'll drive from Houston, Texas, all the way to Galveston, which is right at the edge, on the southern edge of Texas, where of course, the next step is the Gulf of Mexico. And we do, rites and rituals and celebrations of ancestors. And one of the things that we do is that we put, fruits and vegetables in the water, and we send it, in a direction of the ancestors, and of course the spirit of the sea, and those, who didn't make the passage, coming from the transatlantic slave Holocaust, right? But it's a take on a common ritual where, the Africans will take some of the first fruits and they'll replant them back into the ground, right? And there's many different kind of lessons that you can ascertain from that. And there's, many practical reasons. And so, but one of the lessons that you can learn, of course, is this concept of reinvesting. And farming can help you to understand on a practical level what it means to be able to get some fruits of your labor, but you take a portion of that, the first fruits, what they would call tithes back in the day, and reinvest it back into the land. Or if you have a business or something like this, you're reinvesting it back into the business. And so, has very practical applications. So, what is a systematized way of doing it? How can we scale, you know, our activities and the like? These are the things that we want to know. And so there's some reoccurring themes in ci.Ka. And so I want to introduce you to this concept called template theory. And template theory is the act of building themes and principles based off of a consonantal template. So this is a linguistic thing, with the switching of vowels giving new words and concepts, right? So for those of you who are familiar with Semitic, this is a key staple in the Semitic languages. So what you'll have is a consonant root that means a particular theme, and then due to the changing of the vowels, you'll get these fluctuations and nuances in meaning, right? So in the ancient Egyptian language, it's no different. In many African languages, this is in fact the case. So we're going to use that principle of template theory, because the consonants provide the template, and then you just change out the vowels to kind of flush out and expand on the central themes for which the template, which is shaped by the consonants, provide you. So for us, just like in the ancient Egyptian language, we are going to be working with a KM template. So that's going to be our template, right? And so we're being creative here. So we're going to take those two A's in between the KM in Kim, and the first A is going to stand for Afrocentric or Afrocentricity. And for those of us who are into the academic space, it can also stand for Africology, which is a discipline, right? So that first A in ci.Ka stands for Afrocentric or Afrocentricity and Africology, right? Which is the African-centered study of African history, people, and phenomena. And so the second A in our template stands for agricultural. So that's why I said at the beginning, ci.Ka, the Afrocentric agricultural philosophy, paradigm, and praxis. So this is, how we're building this here. And so lastly, the chi in ci.Ka is the nominal prefix meaning the way or the manner. So when we're talking about ci.Ka as a philosophy or a paradigm, this is the way of calm, right? Of farming, or the philosophy, the manner, the way of farming, but from an Afrocentric agricultural lens, right? We can also say agrocentric, right? We're grounding ourselves in nature, right? Yeah, which is the general African way. And so in part of, and this is kind of just human tradition, when words kind of sound alike and similar, the ancients believed that certain words were connected based upon their commonality in terms of pronunciation. And so in linguistics, we call that phenomenon paronymy, right? And then, of course, for those of you who read and write the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, you know that they did not write out their vowels. They only kept the consonants in terms of the writing script. Of course, when they spoke with vowels, but when they wrote, they only wrote the consonants. So, these are just some KM principles, some words in the Chiluba Bantu language with KM as the template. And then, of course, with the changing of vowels, you get various different words. So we have, for example, chikama. arrogance, brutality, effrontery, impertinence, and rudeness. These are the postulations and attitudes that we want to avoid when we are dealing with people, especially those who may not have as much information or knowledge as we do, right? Or if we are physically stronger than somebody, we're not bullying them, right? But there's another aspect of this. So these are the kinds of things that we want to avoid: arrogance, brutality, rudeness, etc. But there's also a form of it that we do want to have, especially in this time and age, and that's ci.Ka or ci.Ka. That is audacity and boldness, because it takes boldness, it takes courage to be able to live in your own truth and to be African in this day and age. And so we need more people with a ci.Ka type of attitude, right? And then there's this concept of kama, meaning to squeeze or to express. In other words, to create, right? So when it comes to squeezing, this is especially for when you're doing like cooking, like kneading dough, or even when you're making pottery and the like. But in the other end is to express or to create. So we need more creatives. Kama also means to love, to seek, desire, and to visit, right? That means to check up on one another, to love one another. What is that process? How can farming teach us how to love? Kama, to be settled, set of a matter, to end, to stop. So we want to be able to have systematized processes and a cultural approach to settling differences and the like. So this is something that we'll deal with at another time. Kamakana, to desiccate, to dry completely. Don't know what I would use that for, but there's a second definition of this word, meaning to be strong and to be solid, right? And when somebody is saying to be solid and to be strong, this is in essence dealing with ethics and character, not only physically, but when we say that someone is solid, that they deal in truth, that they say what they're going to, they do what they're going to, they do what they said that they would do, right? And everywhere they go, they are respected because of their good character. In ci.Ka, footprint, track, fingerprint, claw, paw. And I'm using this creatively to come with the concept of leaving your mark. What is the legacy? So I'm going to use this little word ci.Ka, meaning footprint or track or fingerprint, but to metaphorically refer to legacy. So how can ci.Ka help us to leave our mark in the earth, at minimum in our family, in terms of our individual legacies, right? ci.Ka, to sit, sitting, wait, stay quiet, to sit down, to live, to reside, to behave. There's so much here, and we'll get into this a little bit later. But chikomo, inkum, ngam, mukam, to sit, location. And so Afrocentricity has to deal in part with location theory. So when you read Dr. Molefe Kiti Asante's work, you'll come across a segment where he's talking about Afrocentricity in association with this concept of location. When you're reading a text, where is the author located in relation to African people when discussing African people and phenomena, right? And so when we talk about Chikomo or Mukam, right, in terms of location, and so it's not only in terms of a physical location of where African people But we're also going to talk about this within the concepts of Afrocentricity. And then Kum, chief, or someone of social weight, Wakam Chikomo, chief, which is self-explanatory. So we're talking about kingship. What does it mean to be king? Right? To have importance in social weight. And what are the responsibilities of someone who is empowered? Right? And lastly, ci.Ka, bravery, courage, fortitude, boldness, and valor. And of course, these are characteristics that we hope to develop processes in terms of rites of passages for young people so that they can learn to be this for, themselves and the people, right? But these are the particular characteristics. So this is a variant of this word up here, right? So it's that two sides to the coin. So too much to the left, you're arrogant, you're rude, impertinent. But, on the right-hand side of that equation is bravery, courage, boldness, right? And so boldness in ci.Ka, boldness, but also ci.Ka, boldness, valor, fortitude, because again, this same consonant sequence also has to deal with to be strong, solid. So I'm hoping you're seeing how we can use this. So with each one of these can be particular principles and points of discussions as we are developing this system of ci.Ka. And so now we move on to ci.Ka as a paradigm. And so it's really quite simple. Farming is the model, and we're utilizing nature as a mentor and as a guide, for our lives and behavior. And, so why models? And so, and I didn't put the sources because I took this from a different presentation that I have, which is the source on here, but I'll get that source later. So these aren't my words. This is from the text. And it says, why models? We live in a complex world with diverse people, firms, and governments whose behaviors aggregate to produce novel, unexpected phenomena. We see political uprising, market crashes, and a never-ending array of social trends. How do we make sense of it? Models. Evidence shows that people who think with models consistently outperform those who don't. And moreover, people who think with lots of models outperform people who use only one. Why do models make us better thinkers is the question. So one of the reasons why, we're going to be using farming and nature as our model, because as the text says, evidence shows that people who think with models consistently outperform those who don't. And this is something that I see that we're lacking, especially, and I know we have people from all over the world who are viewing this right now, but especially in the African American community, we don't have a single model that permeates for the entire culture. And this is something that we need, because when we think in terms of models, and the models become the frameworks, the paradigms for which we operate under, this will allow us to outperform, others who do not, right? Or who have inadequate models. And so there's no better model than nature itself, right? And so models help us to better organize information, to make sense of that fire hose or hairball of data, choose your metaphor, available on the internet. Models improve our abilities to make accurate forecasts. So this is where, science, especially data science comes into play. They help us to make better decisions on that more effective strategies. So I hope y'all seeing where I'm going with this in terms of ci.Ka as a model, in terms of farming as a model, because we're trying to develop better and more effective strategies for living. They can even improve our ability to design institutions and procedures. We'll get into that in a moment. Models enable us to better understand the world by organizing information. They endow us with the frameworks to make more accurate predictions, to formulate better strategies, and to design better policies. To use models effectively, though, you need more than one, which we will get into. So, what is a system? A system, according to Rappaport, is an entity which can maintain some organization in the face of change from within or without. So, not only like if we talk about like agriculture, like a farm is a system, that is a miniature ecosystem. So by understanding ecosystems and how ecosystems works, it will give you kind of a framework to understand how social systems can be, right? And what's the idea of a system in itself? Because we're trying to develop strategies, adaptive strategies, to be able to tower over life's 1001 challenges, right? And we're a unique set of challenges, especially here in the diaspora, where we're living amongst our historical enemies, to say the least, right? And where we are not in power to a great degree, that we can live more sovereignly in these United States and abroad. So we have to create models, we have to create systems that will allow us to maintain the structure in the face of fluctuation and change. And so, according to Ryan, a set of objects or elements in interaction to achieve a specific goal. And lastly, the function of any system is to convert or process energy, information, or materials into a product or outcome for use within the system or outside of the system, the environment, or both. Indeed, if a system is to survive, it must save some of the outcome or product to maintain the system, aka investing, reinvesting. How do we get people to reinvest in themselves and reinvest in the culture, in the people, right? So you just don't graduate and you just make your money and you just stay off, and don't come back and reinvest in the community that helped make you, right? And so when we talk about all systems and what they have in common, you have inputs, you have outputs, you have processes, you have feedback. It's a communication feedback loop, control, environment, and of course, a goal. And so, some of this stuff I'm gonna be going by fast because I'm just introducing the stuff. We'll get into, some of these will be, an hour-long conversation in the future, right? And I love this scene in Black Panther 2. So this is when, T'Challa's mother, comes to visit. I forgot her character's name, Lupita Nyong'o's character's name, in Haiti, right? And many people kind of gloss over this over here, right? What you see here is an aquaponic system, and they're growing food and plants, and this is a system. It's a feedback. There's water going in and out of the system. I don't think this one has any fish in it, but there's some you'll see with fish in it, right? And you can see that they are bringing this indoor urban garden system, to life in this particular center here. And so if you're not really paying attention, you would just kind of speed by this. But this is a very important thing, and these are the things that I want to get a few people to get acquainted with. And I see we got our brother Ali Dawood L in the chat, and he is doing a lot of this work himself, and he's already agreed to come on the show. It's just we gotta find a good date, for both of our schedules. And this is the kinds of conversations and the things that we want to bring to light here. So Lastly, ci.Ka as praxis, right? So in 2015, I published a book called Where is the Love? How Language Can Reorient Us Back to Love's Purpose. And, this book was inspired by a documentary film that I saw where this young African Sudanese brother, teenager, was in love with this little white girl. And he gave her a bird to show his interest in the girl when he was in the United States, and she was looking at him funny. And then I was wondering, well, what are African ways of showing displays or affection and love? And this started a long process of looking up love across Africa. And even, of course, because I can't do anything without doing a linguistic analysis, analyzing words for love, and even seeing if the word love in English has, an African origin. So that's what this particular text is about. And so, I came up with this concept called a gromance, right? And, in that particular text, I discuss using farming as a basis to better understand the concept of love. So for those who have been kind of following me, I've been on this farming kick for a very long time, right? And so that book was what, 8 years ago? And so, when we talk about a gromance, we're talking about addressing how to grow with people. I think part of the disconnect with a lot of us today is that we don't know how to grow with people. And we get too tired of people. We don't know how to adjust and things, but that's also because we don't have any training in that area when we are young. And I think that if my hypothesis is that, we may see some better outcomes in life if African people, would make agriculture the culture, and to be able to teach the inner workings of relationships, while training them in the fine art of agriculture and learning how to create environments and the types of ingredients and patience and stuff to watch something to grow, and to apply that to their interpersonal relationships. So this is what we're doing here. So we're starting small and working to reach our full potential. So we're dealing with the behaviors, attitudes, and rituals one must do to maintain healthy, intimate relationships, right? And so one of the things that we dealt with is the word myrrh, that means love. In the ancient Egyptian language, it means to love, to desire, and then merut, love. These are the forms in Coptic. You could find it in the Acholi language, maru, meaning to love, the Luo language, Mongbetu, and then Wolof, Mar, to love madly. And in my Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1 text, I show you throughout the text that the MR consonant sequence in ancient Egyptian, which this is the word here, this is when you see this glyph here, one of its pronunciations is MR, right? And thus the phonetic complement here, meaning to love, right? And but this consonant sequence corresponds internally in the ancient Egyptian language to KM. The syllables are inverse. So the K became R and M still remains M. So when you say Kim and when you say Myrrh, these are two different dialect variations of the same term. But, these were inherited from the proto-language because you'll see variants of that even in Chiluba Bantu, right? But this Myrrh, to love, is Chiluba Kama, to love, to desire, to wish, to think, right? So, using template theory in terms of ci.Ka, we're using farming and we're using paronymy here to address love and relationships, intimate and business, right? And so the ancient Egyptians were an agricultural people. So, one of the teachings of Ptah he uses kind of an agricultural framework to discuss the nature of relationships, right? So in this particular, in the teachings of Ptah, he says, if you, and he's talking to, I believe his son, but if not his son, he's just talking to men in general. He says, if you are worthy and establish your house, love your wife passionately and rightfully. Give her food and clothe her. Oil is the prescription for her body. Make her happy as long as you live. Now, I have to stop here because we all know good and well that you can never make a woman happy. And yes, I'm throwing shots fired. I need sound effects. Pew, 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 pew. Shots fired. I said what I said. But anyway, make her happy as long as you live, for she is a valuable field for her Lord. Do not judge her, deliver her from violence, suppress it. For her eye, and this is talking about your role as a protector for your wife. For her eye is a storm wind when she sees it. Soothe her heart and with what you have gained. So share in your abundance. So when you're working and you get some abundance, of course, share it with your wife. Don't hoard it. Thus will you cause her to remain in your house. Right? So notice what he says here, for she is a valuable field. Remember, we talked about value, right? And when they're talking about a field here, this is, and so what he's saying right here, he's like, if you are worthy and establish your house, love your wife passionately and rightfully, give her food, clothe her. Oil is the prescription for her body. Make her as happy as long as you live, right? Deliver her from violence. Don't judge her. These are all things that you would invest. This is a discussion about investment. Invest in this valuable field. She will multiply what you have. Right? She is fruitful. And not in just in terms of bearing children. He's giving you an idea here and what it means to invest in your wife, to invest in your relationship. This is cultivation here, right? But he doesn't stop simply with intimate relationships in terms of your wives. He says, don't be mean to your friends. They are one's what? Watered field, one's kemet, one's ci.Ka, and more important than one's wealth. So he's talking about here relationships. And then again, he's using these farming terms, a valuable, a watered field in terms of your friendships. Of course, you have to invest in them. Be kind, pour into your friendships, pour into your spouses. Because a watered field and a valuable field, of course, produces for you. So there's an interchange. There's an expected interchange. So when you work and invest in your friends, it ends up in the end working out for you. It's an interchange, right? And so this next this is coming from the scribe Ani in his Declaration of Innocence, right? He says, "Do not eat bread while another stands by without extending your hand to him. As for food, it will always be there. It is the person who does not endure. One person may be rich and another poor, but food remains for one who shares it. As for one who was rich last year, he may be a vagrant this year. Therefore, do not be greedy to fill your belly without regard for others. For you do not know what your end will be like if you become needy. Another may do good to you. The water course of last year has passed away, but another course is here this year. Great lakes have become dry and sandbanks turn into deep places. Thus, no person develops in a single way. It is a lesson of the Lord of life." right? So what is this? It's the same theme here. Invest in others. Develop your friendships. Make your friendship strong. Because when they are in a period of need, help them out. Because you may be doing well today, but you may not be doing well tomorrow. So more agricultural things, rivers dry up, right? It may not be a rainy season and you may need some help. But because you have invested in your close friends and family in your time of need, I'll say 7 or 8 times out of 10, you have help. And because they will remember, there's some people in the world who just, you have helped them and they won't they won't help you. It's just that just comes with the territory. But for the most part, when you have invested in people, the people will invest in you. And this is what this is saying here, right? And so this is very important for economic reasons. The late Dr. Amos Wilson, in his text, The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychology, and the Politics of White Supremacy, he says the following. He says, we're suffering from the absence of an economic system. Money is not a system. Money is what it is. A system involves the systematic and organized utilization of money, a systematized utilization and distribution of money. Without the pattern, without the system, so remember, we keep coming across this term systems, right? Without the organization, one does not have an economy. An economy exists prior to money. There were economies in the world before money was invented. We don't even have to have money to have an economized system. Remember, the ancient Egyptians didn't have no money. So how were they able to build a large and sustainable economy with no money? Because they had relationships. So ultimately, when we study an economic system, we recognize that an economic system at its base refers to the nature of the relationship between people. It's the systematic way people choose to relate to one another that makes an economic system, not money. When we lack a systematic way of relating to each other, then we can have money and still be poor, have money and be robbed, which is what we are. And so this is kind of partial the motivation behind ci.Ka as a philosophy, paradigm, and practice, right? It is to establish a systematic way of relating to one another, using farming as a model so that we can build and sustain in the long run a strong economic system, right? He goes on to say, why do we suffer from this problem then? Why is it the Black personality created? I try to get across the fact that every maladjusted characteristic in the Black personality serves an economic function. Each maladjusted characteristic is not there by accident. It's not there simply because Europeans hate us. It's there because it maintains their economic dominance. If I've got money, I can help you. But if I distrust you, I won't help you, and you may not make it. It's not the absence of money, it's the presence of mistrust. If I will not cooperate, if you cannot rely on me, then we cannot have an economic system, even though we may have money. In other words, a people must trust, be reliable, be dependable. In other words, jikama or kamakana, strong and solid. You must be dependable. Have respect for each other if they are to develop a viable economic system. When they have those kinds of relationships, they have a social system and they can build and they can grow economically. Let's go back. What did Ptahhotep say? Don't be mean to your friends. They are one's watered field and more important than one's wealth. And what is Amos Wilson saying here? In other words, that people must trust. If you're constantly mean in conflict with others. It's hard for people to trust you. And if they don't trust you, if your character is off, then they will not spend money with you to help them solve their problems. So at the end of the day, this is why the love component, gamma, is very important and is more than just simply being nice to someone. And so part of the problem, as Amos Wilson said, is that we have a large distrust for one another. So how do we address this? How do we train people to be solid individuals that are able to grow and be patient with one another and to be trustworthy so that you can build an economic system? This is one of the motivations again behind ci.Ka. And so there's other things, and I'm not saying this is the only one, but this is just one way in which we can approach it in terms of ci.Ka. Right. So I'm trying not to do too much linguistic work in this conversation, but in the text, and I have more examples than this, I demonstrate that the KM consonant sequence, or the template, corresponds in the Chiluba language also with SL consonant sequence. And, you can see the variations, on the screen right here, but I want you to kind of pay attention to the third row, right? So there's a kim meaning to pay in terms of the verb, and then there's a kim meaning payment, right? It corresponds to Chiluba, Sela, to pay the dowry for a wife, and Sala, Sula, or Sola, divide proportionally, collect here and there by taking, receiving or buying from each other. And in the text, in chapter 3, in the conclusion section, after I made my analysis, I put forth the hypothesis that the word kimit could possibly mean a marketplace based on this word, because this word to pay and payment is still built off of that same word meaning to fill, to complete, because they're talking about completing a transaction, right? To exchange. And as you can see, the same consonant sequence meaning to complete, put an end to, is the same consonant sequence here in Chiluba. Sula, to be finished, completed, to be tired, exhausted, etc. Right? So now when we talk about ci.Ka, not only as a paradigm, an underlying African philosophy, but also to describe a marketplace. And so you can see in this first row here, Chiluba, there's a word chisalu. So we've already established the sound meaning correspondences between KM and SL, KM in the ancient Egyptian and SL in Chiluba. And so this word here, coming from these words here, to pay, to make payment, right, gives you this word chisalu, which is essentially ci.Ka. And this is just a different dialectical variation of saying the word. Market, misalu, at the market. And so I'll argue that it's kimit, tikim, chisalu, right? And I got to thank our good brother Aziz Fall, or Zoo221, whatever his numbers are this week, Zoo Chedu, for this word in Wolof, com, meaning economy, right? So ci.Ka is not only dealing with, a particular philosophy in terms of ways of living, but also describes a marketplace, right? And so part of this ongoing project is also to have traveling. I'm trying to establish some traveling farmers markets, right? So we'll discuss that in a future video once I get some other things solidified. But we're talking about economics here, right? And there's another variation, another consonant sequence for which Kemet actually corresponds to in Chiluba, and that's with the S and Imba, right? And so here's one, Kim also means to gain, and here's the Waterbush source for it. And so in Chiluba, Sumba, buy, to get, to gain. Chisumba, commerce, trade. So when we talk about Chikam, commerce, trade. Musumbi, a buyer, a customer. And even in this variant, so we see the changing of the vowel here. So it's somba, meaning to borrow, right? And there's some other variations all dealing with commerce and trade. I just wanted to show this here, right? So lastly, Chikam, in part of the praxis, we're going to be dealing with the whole aspect. So we can see that again, there's a reason why, because of course this word here means farm. In its practical form, it just means farm. And then us and our little esoteric in terms of the philosophy paradigm and practice, it's an Afrocentric agricultural philosophy paradigm and practice based on farming as a model. But the sign that we use, the emblem, the hieroglyph, is in fact the hoe itself. And it has significance not only in ancient Egypt, but of course across Africa, which we'll show here. And so this is the reconstructed form of the word that ultimately becomes Kemet and all these other words that you saw in throughout the text and even in this presentation. And so here's another variation of the word Kemet itself in the ancient Egyptian language. So the root is the K, and then it ends in the nasalized uvular trill, and this other variant has the S. So when we talk about the hoe, there's mer, but there's also siker, meaning a plow or hoe, and then siker, plowing field work in terms of a verb, but sikir, destined for plowing in terms of cattle, but sikerit, just like you have kemet, plowing seed field. And then this verb again, plow, to till the field, and sikir or sikeret, farmland, right? And harvest and plow, order field. So, we can also argue that we can, and this is what we're doing. So this is mer, it's also sikir, it's also ber or ba in the ancient in Egyptian language. But because this prefix can also refer to instruments, when we refer to this in terms of an instrument, then we're going in our system, we're going to pronounce this chikam, this hole right here. And so even in the Where is the Love book, I have a chapter in there in terms of understanding love by being a whole. And no, we're not talking about, the short form of the word whore. We're talking about being the instrument here. And we're going to, this is, a picture of an artifact of the ancient Egyptians in terms of the whole. So you can see this is with the inspiration for the hieroglyph that you see right here. And so this is an actual picture of a whole. And these are just some variations. So we have ber to whole. So that's our saying that this glyph here can also be pronounced ber, or so-called ba, meaning to hold crops, to hack up to whole, a temple foundation, and all that other kind of stuff. And here's the sekir again, meaning to cultivate, to till, and even ikinu, whole, right? So this is a different variation of playing it. So now the nasalized avular trill in the blue has fully nasalized and become in here. And even in Wolof, you have yakan, which is this word here, meaning to hold, to scoop out, to serve out of. And then in ci.Ka itself, iken, to hold, to scoop out, to hack. So these are just different variations. So there's many different ways to talk about cultivation and hoeing. Ultimately, they all come from the same word. And so this lets you know that there's different languages being spoken in ancient Egypt, but that's a different conversation for a different day. So let's move forward. And so in the Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, I'll also show you that KM internally corresponds to dotted HN as in Nancy, but of course also the K and the nasalized uvula are trilling. So you can see these correspondences here right now. So that's just for your own edification. It is in the book itself in various different forms, and we'll come back to that a little later. But I want to kind of hurry up and get to this section. So now we understand, we're calling the whole ci.Ka because kam also corresponds to myrrh in the ancient Egyptian language, and the also refers to hoe and to cultivate, to till, and things of this nature. So I won't get into the linguistics because this will take a while to explain, but it's here for those of you who kind of understand and follow me and know where I'm going with all of this, right? But the whole also, we can use this symbol as a basis and a model to discuss and develop future leaders. And this is already being done on the continent. So, it's keeping within African tradition. So let's discuss, right? So first and foremost, like you can see the king, this is the scorpion king. And this is this famous mesa. So this is a drawing or facsimile of, a part of the jar, but this is the picture of the actual artifact that you can see here. So you can see the Scorpion King, and he's holding the hoe, the myrrh sign that we saw, or the ikin or ber, all these different ways that you can pronounce the same glyph, right? So you're seeing, the king holding. And why is the king holding? You can see here he's starting a ritual where he's opening the canal. So you can see the water right here. He's digging a canal. So here's the main Nile River, and he creates a canal because the job of the king is to, remember what I said in terms of Ptahhotep, and so let's go back to that because I think that'll be a good segue. So let's go back to that. Where are you at, Ptahhotep? So remember, Ptahhotep says, soothe, when he's talking about, the husband to the wife, soothe her heart with what you have gained. Remember, there's a word kim meaning to gain, right? So soothe her heart with what you have gained, meaning that you are to share your prosperity, right? And then the king is doing that when it comes to him being the opener of canals, because he's bringing prosperity. Remember, in terms of kimoyo that we discussed about the art of adding life to life, he's bringing the water, the necessary component for farming so that the people may live. And so remember that kings in Africa, in many respects, were initially rainmakers, right? So in ancient Egypt, it didn't rain that much, if at all. And so the role of the king as the rainmaker shifted to the role as the king being the person who digs the canals, who makes the Nile River to flood, right? And so often you will see the kings being buried by these figurines called a shapti. So this is the shapti of Seti the One, right? And in the folded arms, you can see drawn on the figurine a set of holes, meru, as we would say, right? Or chikams, you know. And so these are supposed to represent spirits that would do the agricultural work, the busy work of the king in the afterlife. And so, like in this particular conversation, is talking about a spell that exhorts the shopti to substitute itself if the owner is asked to till the fields to irrigate the land. That's why he has the farming tools. To this end, even royal shoptis are often depicted clutching a pick and a hoe, and with a basket hanging over one or both shoulders. In this example, the king holds the hoe in his left hand and the pick in his right, but there is no basket on the back, right? So you can see the king, like this isn't the hoe is a royal emblem, just like many of the other royal emblems that we see that the ancient Egyptian kings, would be depicted with, right? And so again, these canals that you see, that is his role to commission, the creation of the canals so that the people may live and flourish, right? So on the right hand side, you can see this Adinkra symbol of the Akan people and other folks in Ghana. And so I'm not sure quite how to pronounce this correctly, but I'm pronouncing it as Okuafo Pa, and it means good farmer, and it represents hard work, diligence, productivity, commitment, and entrepreneurship. And I am arguing and I'm adopting all of these meanings for our symbol of a hoe, which we call ci.Ka, right? And in this particular, and this is from symbolsage.com, it says that Okua Fopa represents the qualities of a successful farmer, entrepreneurship, diligence, and productivity. Farming is a difficult job that requires a lot of commitment and hard work. In order to gather a bountiful harvest, farmers need to be diligent, focused, and committed to their job. The Akans use this symbol as a reminder of hard work and difficulties a farmer must face to feed his people. These are all characteristics that we would want people in our culture and the communities to learn and to have in terms of staples in their character. And so, we use the hieroglyph for the whole to represent exactly this, because this is in fact what it meant in ancient Egypt as well, even though they pronounce and their holes look a little bit different here, right? So now in this text, Sacred Kingship, the African Case by Henry J.M. Classine, if I'm saying that correctly. The abstract reads, in this article, the sacred kingship in Africa will be analyzed. In order to do so, 8 cases will be described in some detail. And after that, by comparison of the data presented, conclusions with regard to this phenomenon will be formulated. The descriptions are limited to traditional Black Africa. Neither ancient Egypt, which should have been traditional Black Africa, nor modern Islamic states are included. Central themes of research will be the assumed influence of Sacred King on fertility, his eventual regicide in cases of bad harvest, and the occurrence of transgressions during the inaugural rituals. So there's a section in here where he's talking about the Mukama. And the Mukama, so remember that the word Kam means chief, king, solid, strong, all of the other kind of stuff. So in Uganda, you would say Omukama, right? Which means king or lord. And Abakama would be the plural, and is a title used in Uganda and neighboring countries for monarchs, especially in the kingdoms of Bunyoro and Butoro. After reestablishing the Ugandan kingdoms in the 1990s, the Omukama are nowadays accepted as kings with a merely cultural function. Right. So let's go back. So in this text, he says, he's describing, he says, quite a lot is known about the inauguration rituals of a Mukama. From the detailed report written by KW, KW tells us that first eventual competing brothers had to be defeated. So you had to fight your brothers, just like in Black Panther, right? Then the ritual started after a white bull and a white cock were slaughtered. We'll skip down, and he says, while swearing an oath that he would rule his people good, oil was poured on his head. With he was consecrated. Later on, he received a hoe, which indicated that he had become a father to his people. So we can see here that in Uganda, the king, the person who was just elected king, was given a royal emblem of a hoe, just like what we see here with King Scorpion in ancient Kemet, right? So we go down to another page. It says, then the Mukama met his head royal sister. I'll skip that. We'll go down to this section over here. It says, this is connected with the fact that the Beto were cattle holders. The king also fulfilled several rituals to protect agriculture, such as eating coffee beans and handling a hoe. Also, the emphasis on rainmaking pointed in this direction. So remember what I said earlier, that kings initially in Africa were associated with being rainmakers. They got into a covenant with certain nature spirits, and they would convince nature to rain, and that would bring prosperity to the people. In ancient Kemet, they did not rain, so they had to have the relationship with the Nile River and the god of the Nile River. And who was the god of the Nile River besides Hapi? But that was really kind of later on in history. The god of the Nile River is Osiris, right? So that's a conversation for a different day. But, all of this stuff is connected here, right? And here's a good painting, of course, of African Americans during, slavery in the after period. This is a painting by Ellis Wilson called The Field Workers. And you can see, us or the ancestors in the United States, with their hoes. Like this was a staple instrument of productivity back then. And so lastly, there is this article called Breaking Ground, Hoes in Pre-Colonial South Africa, Typology, Medium of Exchange, and Symbolic Value. And this is just a very good article all the way around. But in this section here, this is actually two different pages, but I just kind of broke it up and put them on the same page. So it says hoes as symbols. The use of hoes in marriage exchanges indicates that the hoe was imbued with important symbolic capital. So not only was the hoe a symbol of royal power and abilities, it was also used in marriage exchanges in places like South Africa. The variety of symbolic associations and meanings of from their use in specific contexts. Old, locally manufactured hoes had an important role in communication with the ancestors in Southern Africa. So, they would also put them on the shrine. So I'm going to skip down. Kept for generations and placed on shrines, they were considered to have special powers of protection and healing. In a shrine, the chief of the Banarine, or the Banarine near Zanin, kept ritual objects, including a type 6 hoe to perform ceremonies such as rainmaking. So this is all the way in South Africa. So we were just in Uganda, and now we're in South Africa. And the hoe and the king and the chief is still associated with rainmaking. Preparation of the seed for the planting season and the other rituals on behalf of the community. So the in ci.Ka, the hoe is the symbol of royalty, but also, the responsibility of a leader to open the channels for prosperity to hit the community so that they can, grow and utilize these different facets of life to the best of their ability. And so, this is a conversation and discussion in terms of the underlying philosophy and praxis, right? And so I even am conceiving of, when we're developing a rites of passage program for young people, uh, and even when we're developing our families, like I'm envisioning like a man creates, carves out a wooden hoe to give to their sons, you know, and daughters when they get married, and they pass this instrument down from generation to generation, right? And as part of, just a cultural practice which kind of links us to the past and just a new way of doing it in our current time, right? So just, creative ways to utilize this to keep these frameworks alive and well in the minds of the people, right? So lastly, here are some important texts for your library. And so, here's a text that I'm currently reading right now: Agropolis, the social, political, and environmental uh, dimensions of urban agriculture. And then this other text here: Agriculture and Urban Planning, generating livelihoods and food security, right? There's another text: Land and Power, Sustainable Agriculture and African Americans. And then I've also mentioned already this other text, and I don't know why that sticker's on there. Rooted in the Earth, Reclaiming the African American Environmental Heritage, right? And then these others, it's a set of 4 books. So the first 2 is Beyond You and Me, Inspirations and Wisdom for Building Community. And the second one is Designing. Well, this is actually the first book. No, this is actually the first book. This is the second one. So Designing in terms of when they were published. So Designing Ecological Habitats, Creating a Sense of Place, right? The last one, The Song of the Earth, a synthesis of the scientific and spiritual worldviews, and Gaian Economics, Living Well Within Planetary Limits. I plan on doing a similar series, but that is very African-centered. Now, keep in mind that these books, although the editors are in general white, the contributions, the individual chapters are from people from all kinds of backgrounds from all around the world. Even Malidoma Some has a chapter in Beyond You and Me in this place. So then in Africa, South America, Europe, Asia, you have contributions from everywhere. So that is it. This is your, I don't know how brief it was, but that was a 2-hour brief introduction into ci.Ka. So let me see if my camera, let me turn my light on, will do any better here. And no, my light is not working. Oh, there we go. It didn't really do that much better. But so I hope that, y'all were able to glean, the details of, what's to come. And of course, in all of that will be broken up into chunks. And I plan on creating a curriculum, but I want to, kind of team up with again, people who are already doing this, so that, when you're looking for specific ways to develop urban gardening and urban farming in your house or on your property, if you have, because you can do this in your apartment, to a small scale, or, even if we get into real estate and we buy a building and we just, have indoor, urban gardenings inside. Like, these are some of the ideas and things that we're going to discuss in the near future. So all of that, derives from conversations that have started with this initial research. So, this is the academics, ci.Com is the practicality, and, hopefully, y'all will find this useful, and, we'll be building more about this in the future. So if there are any questions, I wasn't able to view all of the comments, and so I will see, not too many. Let me see. So that's what the BRICS Summit is all about: establish new relationships. Indeed, science greetings. Isn't myrrh the name of the word pyramid? Well, MR is it's a consonant sequence in the Egyptian. So if you see, there are tons of MR words in the ancient Egyptian language. So they did not write out their they didn't write out their vowels. They only wrote the consonants to the word. So the vowels, of course, change the meanings of things. So there is a myrrh that means pyramid or tomb, but that is different from the myrrh that means love and friendship and things of that nature. So got to keep that in mind. And yes, this is the link to go to my website to purchase the book, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1. And let me see. Did I show y'all no, I did not. But when I do these programs in terms regarding the ci.Ka, this will be the intro. Well, let's go down. So here we go. So this will be the intro to the program. So hopefully, if we get brother Ali Dawood L in the building, this will be, the intro for the segments. So let me see. Which I don't know if Asar mentioned him, but brother Omawali Africa is be reaching out to him as well, because he's been doing a lot of stuff dealing with food sovereignty. So I want to connect, my audience with what he's doing with his program out here in Philadelphia. He says the cannibalism part in the text on the previous slide was wild. It was, but there's some other areas in Africa where it's similar attitudes, and even in ancient Egypt. But they made it symbolic ultimately and started talking about eating the gods. But yeah, it's crazy. So I wanted to save that for another conversation in the future. And let me see. I don't think there was anything else that far up. So I'm going to just scroll back down. Thank you, Sister Mika, for the commentary. And Brother Ali Dawood L says, good build as always. He said, yep. You can grow everywhere, no excuses. It says, yep. It says, I'm a piano. Yep. Yeah, I've been listening to that before it even had a name, because I listen to house music in general. So, but yeah, so for those who, want to know more about, and there's so much, because again, this is 500 pages. There's so much material in here and conversations that we can have all year. And so I encourage you to, get the book. And if there are no questions, I guess I will just end the show. And so I do appreciate each and every one of you for listening. Please make sure that you share the show. And if you have any questions, you can hit me up on my website, and, we can move forward from there. So with that said, I wish you all well, and until next time, peace.
reality, breaking down all my fantasies. It would be nice if I at least had one fantasy. That new reality about to take a terabyte from the American apple pie, better get a slice. It's kinda scary the way that this life is moving on. Marvin's doing backflips inside his grave, what's going on? We have head-on collisions, not seeing another's vision. Maybe that's the reason why some colors fit the description. A lot of relationships need life rafts, sinking ships. I guess you just can't have only one like potato chips. I would love for you to listen with an open heart, but would you really even hear me if it's torn apart? I don't do the things that I used to. I'll be fine even if I lose you, okay? Okay.
Yeah. Tokyo wanna those that. What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for in part Uno. Came to kick the door while the game in judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack light. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 85. Oh, I'm so ready. My enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary. Hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we bout building, elevating the million.